In our own fleet, I don't know, I guess long term we have probably on the order of 10 million vehicles.
Hey, this is Warren Redlick. I'm wearing the Elon Fan Club t-shirt. If you're interested in the shirts, check the merch below. Today we're going to talk about this. How much will it cost for a ride in a robotaxi? How much money will each robotaxi make? How much profit will that generate for Tesla and for the owners of the robotaxis if that's not Tesla? And what does all that mean for Tesla's share price? We're going to talk about those questions right now. Are you ready? Let's go. So in this video, I'm going to take you into a fairly simple version of what I call the robotaxi model, and we're going to look at the year 2025. In a future video, I will look at more complicated models and also look out to 2030. But for now, keep it simple, simple model 2025. 2025 is the early days of robotaxis. Good chance that robotaxis will start operating late 2021, sometime in 2022, very likely by 2023. On January 1st, Elon said in a tweet that full self-driving will, by the end of this year, by the end of 2021, be significantly better than the average human driver. Once it's that much better, then soon after that, we will start seeing robotaxis appear. I think Florida will happen soon. I think China will happen soon. Some other states, some other jurisdictions like Europe will take longer, but we're going to see robotaxis start operating probably in 2022. So early on, there won't be enough robotaxis to meet demand. There will be people who want rides. Robotaxis will cost less than Uber and Lyft and regular taxis. And so the pricing for robotaxis will be higher than the long-run pricing we expect later when there's an ample supply of robotaxis. Somewhere down the road, my guess is by 2030, there will be enough supply of robotaxis that it will start to match demand, and the price of robotaxis will decline significantly. Now, a big question in coming up with a robotaxi model is how do you determine pricing? For this simple model, I'm going to do it on a straight per mile basis. How much does it cost per mile to ride in a robotaxi? The robotaxi will be priced based simply on the mileage that you drive. That's not really how it works. That's not how Uber and Lyft work, but it's a simplification, and that's one of the things we do when we come up with models of things. When I do a more complicated model later on, I will address other ideas, like maybe there's an initial price just to get the ride at all, and maybe the pricing also includes how much time it takes. And if you're dealing with, let's say, Cybertruck towing a trailer, the added mass that it's pulling, or Cybertruck carrying cargo in the back, or a large amount of cargo in a Model Y, maybe that extra mass means you pay an extra charge, or you pay a higher rate because of the extra mass, which consumes more electricity and imposes more wear and tear on the vehicle. But we're going to start with a per mile basis to make it simple. So we know that in Chicago, that Uber and Lyft pricing is over $2 a mile, that the cost of riding an Uber and Lyft works out to over $2 a mile. In some neighborhoods, it's down closer to $2 a mile, but still over. And in other neighborhoods, it's up closer to $2.50 a mile. So that's where we start. With that in mind, we could start with robotaxi charging $2 a mile. I don't think it's going to be that expensive. I think you're going to see a significant drop in order to attract people to switch over from Uber and Lyft. And just because the profits are going to be so high at $1.50 a mile, it doesn't matter. So for this model, mostly we're going to work with $1.50 a mile. And here, because we're keeping it simple, I'm just talking about basically the urban robotaxi, urban suburban robotaxi, that is just taking people from point A to point B. In this model, we're not dealing with towing. We're not dealing with taking cargo from Home Depot somewhere. We're not dealing with any of that complicated stuff. We're not going with long distance intercity travel. We're just talking about urban, suburban, ordinary driving, commuting to work, going on a short trip here or there, going out to a basketball game or a show, and coming home. Simple driving, passengers only, not adding a lot of weight to the vehicle, not doing anything strange. And using Model 3s and Model Ys and the 2023 Tesla Compact as robotaxis. We're not going to get into Cybertruck. We're not using Model S or X or Roadster. Now, in this simple model, I'm assuming, and this is a big assumption, we're going to try other assumptions later, I'm assuming that the Tesla now has a fleet of 5 million vehicles in 2025. These are Tesla-owned vehicles. And these vehicles do 300 miles a day. They drive about 360 days a year. There's 5 days off or to deal with more difficult repairs, whatever. But they drive about 360 days a year. If you made it 350, it wouldn't be a huge difference. They do about 300 miles a day. If you made it 320 or 280, it wouldn't be a huge difference. In my model, I assume that they're occupied 60% of the time, that 60% of the miles they drive are being paid. Sometimes some people think it's only 50%. I personally think it might be closer to 75%. I'm going to include that in a different model, but we're going with 60% here. The software that's operating the Robotaxi network is going to optimize. The average vehicle is not going to be running empty very much. I included a price per mile of $1.50 per mile. And for cost per mile, I put in 10 cents a mile. At Autonomy Day, Elon estimated the cost of a Model 3 around 18 cents a mile. That was consistent with what Testloop was saying they were experiencing with their Model 3s, or what they anticipated with their Model 3s that they were using for their business. But going out to 2025, we're going to have structural battery pack. The vehicles are going to be more efficient. We're going to have million-mile battery. Because of all that, and because Tesla is going to be self-insuring vehicles that are in Tesla's own robotaxi fleet, I think the cost per mile is going to get down to 10 cents a mile for the Model 3 and Model Y. The compact is going to be even less. But right now, we're just going with 10 cents a mile as a simple estimate. Again, in one of the models, I'm going to tweak this a little bit. And I'm not pulling the 5 million vehicles in Tesla's fleet out of the air. At Autonomy Day in 2019, Elon said he thought the Tesla fleet would be 10 million vehicles.
We made an important change to our leases. So if you lease a Model 3, you don't have the option of buying it at the end of the lease. We want them back. In any locations where there's not enough supply for sharing, Tesla will just make its own cars and add them to the network in that place. In our own fleet, I don't know, I guess long term we have probably on the order of 10 million vehicles.
So this is half of the number of vehicles that he was talking about. And to be able to produce 5 million vehicles, don't forget Tesla will be producing Model Ys and Model 3s in Shanghai, Berlin, Texas, and Fremont, all of them. And by 2025, probably by 2024, they will be producing the compact in all 4 locations and maybe in another gigafactory as well, 1 or more gigafactories. So for Tesla to produce 5 million vehicles in the span of 3 years should not be that hard. It's 5 million vehicles for itself over 3 years. That shouldn't be a challenge. I expect that Tesla will be able to produce a fleet of that size if they are so motivated, and they could probably go bigger, which is one of the scenarios I'm going to show later. So if the vehicles are driving 300 miles a day and 60% of the miles are occupied, that works out to 180 miles paid. At $1.50 a mile, that works out to revenue per day of $270 a day. Driving 300 miles with a cost of 10 cents a mile, you get a cost per day of $30. Now, just to be clear, that cost is including the amortization of the value of the vehicle over 1 million miles. That's including electricity. That's including insurance, which again, Tesla is self-insuring. That's including maintenance. Maintenance on a Tesla is very low because there's no oil changes, there's no oil filters. It's a much more simple vehicle to maintain. You have $270 in revenue per day, 360 days a year. That gets you to $97,200 in revenue. And the profit per year, $240 times 360 days, works out to $86,400 a year. This is a big number. Elon forecast $30,000 a year in profit. I'm not sure how he came up with that number. I think he may have been assuming a long-term future situation where the robotaxis are pricing at a lower amount, that they're pricing at $1 or less than $1 a mile instead of the $1.50 a mile we're using here. Now, this model gives you some pretty shocking numbers. If you take $97,000 a vehicle times 5 million vehicles, you get nearly $500 billion in revenue in 2025. And this is just from Robotaxi. With the $86,000 in profit times 5 million vehicles, you get $432 billion in profit. And this is just from the Robotaxis. This doesn't include other money that Tesla makes from selling cars. It doesn't include money Tesla makes from Tesla Energy. It doesn't include money Tesla might make from software. This is just from the rides. I anticipate a world where robotaxis have vending machines in them, and you pay a couple bucks for a coffee or a Coke or a snack. None of that revenue, none of that profit is included in this. It's just the ride. I don't see any of this as unreasonable. I think the $1.50 a mile price seems high, but for 5 million vehicles spread over multiple countries, it's not going to come close to satisfying demand. It's going to be less than the number of Uber, Lyft, and regular taxi drivers that are out there. With the $1.50 pricing, you're going to attract a lot more customers than Uber and Lyft are attracting at over $2 a mile, and taxis are usually even more than that. So this is a pretty good ballpark. Maybe it comes down a little bit, but we're talking about over $400 billion in profit in 2025 just on the robotaxi model. And this is just the Tesla-owned robotaxi fleet. This does not consider, and I'm going to show you in a second, the robotaxis that are owned by other people, by Tesla buyers. I'm buying a Cybertruck, hopefully at the end of this year. I intend to put it in the fleet. There's lots of people who have Model 3s and Model Ys with FSD, and they are planning to put their vehicle into the fleet. So let's look at that. So here I assumed a private robotaxi fleet of 2 million vehicles. That Tesla has sold a lot more vehicles to the public by 2025 than 2 million, but 2 million of those people are willing to put their vehicles into the fleet. They don't drive as many miles. The private owner is using the vehicle themselves. Maybe they don't want their vehicle out in the robotaxi fleet as much, so they only do 200 miles a day instead of 300 miles a day. They're only in the fleet 250 days a year instead of 360 days a year. The private owner's cost per mile is going to be higher. Tesla's going to have economies of scale. So the private owner might have higher costs. So here I assumed 15 cents a mile cost instead of the 10 cents a mile for the Tesla fleet. This gets us to $180 a day in revenue. Cost goes back to $30 a day, the same, because although you're doing fewer miles, your cost per mile is higher. Profit per day ends up being $150 a day, and that's shared profit between Tesla and the vehicle owner. The vehicle revenue works out to $45,000 a year, $180 a day times 250 days. Profit works out to $37,500. Figuring a 70-30 split, that the vehicle owner gets 70% of the profit and Tesla gets 30%, the vehicle owner gets $26,000 in profit, Tesla gets $11,000 in profit per vehicle. You multiply that by the 2 million vehicles and Tesla's getting another $22 billion in profit. Not a lot when you compare that to the Tesla fleet. And this is why I've said before, I think Tesla stopped selling cars and it runs as many vehicles as possible in Tesla's own fleet, because they make a lot more money per vehicle on vehicles in their fleet than they make when you or I own a vehicle and we run it as a robotaxi through their network. But when you add those two numbers together, the $432 billion up at the top of the screen and the $22 billion at the bottom, you end up with about $450 billion in profit for Tesla. Now, keeping in mind that at this point, Tesla is still going to be a fast-growing company, I think it's reasonable to say that Tesla is going to have a price-earnings ratio in the ballpark of 40. Apple currently has a price-earnings ratio over 30. Amazon's price-earnings ratio somewhere around 90. So a PE ratio for a company that's growing, you typically see a PE ratio over 30, and Tesla's going to be growing fast and very profitable. So with that PE ratio of 40 and profit of $450 billion a year, remember, we're not including profit from Tesla Energy, profit from selling cars, other profits. We're just talking about robotaxi profits alone, leaving all the other profits aside. We're talking about an $18 trillion market cap and $18,000 a share price. We do need to take into account some things. There's going to be taxes. So for example, the city of Chicago instituted new taxes on Uber and Lyft in order to get some revenue out of that and probably to help their taxi owner buddies, their regular taxi owner buddies who don't have to pay this same tax. And so it was anywhere from 72 cents a trip to $1.25 a trip on top of whatever the cost was. So that's something that's going to impair robotaxis, making our lives better. But it's likely that one way or another, government's going to take their pound of flesh. And the city was also including an extra $1.75 if you're driving in the downtown area in the weekdays between 6 a.m. and 10 p.m. because of a theory of congestion. Here's another angle on what the Chicago taxation system looks like for Uber and Lyft, and you could expect a similar taxation system would apply in the city of Chicago for Tesla's robotaxi network. On the other hand, the state of Florida has explicitly prohibited by state law local governments from imposing any tax on robotaxi full self-driving networks. Some places will have higher taxes, some places won't. And when Tesla earns profits, of course, they're going to have to pay taxes on those profits, and that's going to affect the overall profits for the company. Market cap will probably be lower than the 18 trillion I just suggested. Maybe it's 15 trillion, maybe it's 10 trillion, it's $10,000 a share, it's $15,000 a share. Still big numbers. And I want to be clear here. If you support the robotaxi future and you realize that lowering the cost of transportation makes the economy work more efficiently, and having EV robotaxis out there makes our lives better in so many ways. They're safer, they're cleaner. There's a lot of advantages to this. We should be encouraging, government should be encouraging this and not taxing it and making it harder. But governments are what governments are. We got to expect it. But you should fight for it. You should make sure your elected officials know that you support the robotaxi future and you don't want them getting in the way. I don't know how much they're going to listen to you, but it can't hurt to try telling them. Get to know your local representatives. Get to know your senators, your congressmen, your state representatives. Let them know. Get the word out. Get your friends to tell them too. Now, I did a pessimistic scenario too, and I'm going to do an optimistic scenario next. So in the pessimistic scenario, Tesla's fleet is only 2 million vehicles in 2025. They only do 250 miles a day. They only operate 300 days a year. And they are occupied only 50% of the time. They only get $1 a mile. And their cost per mile is 15 cents a mile, not the 10 cents a mile I suggested. This is, I think, overly pessimistic, but I'm just trying to give some numbers here to give some sort of framing of what's the low end and what's the high end of where this could all end up. So in this pessimistic scenario, you see revenue of $125 a day. You see a cost per day of $37.50 because it's 15 cents a mile, not 10, although you're doing less miles. And you end up with profit per day of $87. Each vehicle gets $37,500 a year in revenue, $26,250 in profit. This is closer to the numbers Elon talked about at Autonomy Day. And you see an annual fleet revenue. Remember, this is the Tesla-owned fleet. See annual fleet revenue of $75 billion and annual fleet profit of $52 billion. Pretty good. $52 billion. And then we have the privately owned fleet as well. So here, again, to be conservative, the private robotaxi fleet is only 1 million vehicles. They're only doing 150 miles a day, 200 days a year. They cost 20 cents a mile to the owner. Revenue per day is $75 a day. Cost per day is $30 a day. Profit per day is $45 a day. Again, that's shared. So you see annual revenue is $15,000. Annual profit is $9,000 per vehicle. The owner's share of that is $6,300. The Tesla share is $2,700. And you're only getting $2.7 billion in profit for Tesla on that, for a total Tesla robotaxi profit of $55 billion a year. That's still a lot. Now keep in mind, with this model, presumably then Tesla sold a lot more cars and made a lot more money selling cars. Presumably Tesla also made a lot more money on energy because instead of diverting resources, instead of using its batteries for the robotaxi fleet, it used the batteries for building more grid storage. At $55 billion in profit with a price-earnings ratio of 40, you still end up with a market cap of $2 trillion and a share price of $2,000 a share. Nowhere near as much as in the other scenario, but still more than double the share price today. So that's the pessimist scenario. Now the optimist scenario is a lot more fun. In the optimist scenario, we go big. Somehow Tesla manages to scrape together 8 million vehicles. It takes the Model 3s and Model Ys that came off lease. It builds a bunch of Tesla compacts. It drives them more. It somehow manages with the software to achieve 400 miles a day, 360 days a year again. Now, because the software is optimized, we're getting 75% miles occupied. I don't think that's crazy. That if the software is optimizing and the AI learns where people are going to be, the vehicles position themselves in the right places, I think you're going to see those vehicles running closer to full more of the time. Still have $1.50 mile pricing. Here, I've lowered the cost to 8 cents a mile for the Tesla fleet, because I anticipate the 2023 Tesla Compact is actually going to have a cost around 5 cents a mile between depreciating the vehicle, amortizing it over 10 years or a million miles, lower energy costs, structural battery pack, all these things play together. And I think you're going to get that vehicle cost down to 5 cents a mile. So combining that with the Model 3s and Model Ys at 10 cents a mile, you get a ballpark of 8 cents a mile cost. With this approach, we see revenue of $450 a day, and the cost per day is $32. It's a little bit more because we're driving more miles. The profit per day goes up to $418 a day. The revenue per year per vehicle works out to $162,000, and you're looking at about $150,000 in profit per vehicle. Like I said, this is the optimist scenario. I don't think these numbers are crazy. I think they're a little rosy, but I don't think they're crazy, and I do think they're in the realm of possibility. Here you get an annual fleet revenue of $1.3 trillion, and you get annual fleet profit of $1.2 trillion. Again, this is for the Tesla-owned fleet. Let's look at the privately owned fleet as well. Here I assumed a privately owned fleet of 4 million vehicles. This doesn't make a huge difference in the end numbers, but just to do the model, here's what we get. We get 4 million vehicles, assume they do 250 miles a day, 250 days a year, and their cost is 12 cents a mile. So it's more than the 8 cents a mile. It's still more than the 10 cents a mile that the Tesla fleet was getting in the moderate scenario. You get $281 a day in profit, $30 a day in cost, because you're doing 250 miles a day at 12 cents a mile. Profit per day of $251 a vehicle. Each vehicle generates $70,000 in revenue, $62,000 in profit, shared between owner and Tesla at 70-30. The owner gets $44,000 a year in profit. Tesla gets another $19,000 in profit per vehicle, times 4 million vehicles. That works out to another $75 billion in revenue for Tesla. And at the bottom here, you can see the total profit for Tesla ends up working out to close to $1.3 trillion. $1.3 trillion. Figure a 30 price earnings ratio, and you're talking about a market cap close to $40 trillion and a share price close to $40,000 a share. So like I said, that's a pretty optimistic scenario for 2025. What I see going forward out to 2030 is you're going to see a lot more vehicles. The price of a ride is going to drop. And once the price of a ride drops to around 60 cents a mile, you're still going to have substantial profits from this, by the way. But once the price of a ride drops to 60 cents a mile, a large swath of people, the average American spends about 60 cents a mile on owning their own vehicle. The closer you get to that 60 cents a mile, the more of the people who are spending more than the average are going to decide, you know what, I don't want to spend this money on my own car anymore, and Robotaxi is going to be more convenient for me, and you're going to see more and more people switch over and start riding in Robotaxis instead of owning their own cars, and the size of the market grows dramatically. So when you lower the prices in the future, yes, you get less profit per ride, but the size of the market expands so much that as long as Tesla can make enough vehicles, and it balances, the more vehicles they make, the more they've increased supply, the pricing comes down a bit, and what you end up seeing is an even greater amount of revenue and profit because of that balance. So that's the oversimplified model, where all the vehicles are basically the same, doing about the same amount of thing. In the near future, I'm going to put together a more complicated model that incorporates Cybertruck, towing, carrying cargo, maybe some other options, some other things, intercity travel, in order to get a fuller idea, a fuller picture of what's the Robotaxi world going to look like in terms of profit for Tesla and for us as riders. Tesla minibus. The idea of Tesla producing a van-sized vehicle that can carry 20 passengers or 30 passengers, how much revenue that's going to generate, how much profit that's going to generate. This is all coming in the near future. If you like this video, please check out these other videos. Of course, please check out the merch. Links below to the t-shirts. Please support this channel on Patreon. Really appreciate all the Patreon supporters we have. And thank you so much for watching.